Throughout the 1970s, researchers D. Scott Rogo and Raymond Bayless conducted a groundbreaking investigation into what they called phantom phone calls, mysterious telephone communications seemingly originating from deceased individuals. Their 2-year study uncovered dozens of cases where people received calls from those who had already passed away, often with multiple witnesses or corroborating evidence. The following is a compilation of 10 documented accounts of these unexplained communications drawn from their research. The cases demonstrate remarkable patterns. Calls from the recently deceased tend to be brief and confused, while those from individuals who have been dead for several months often maintain longer conversations. Perhaps most intriguing is that in cases of prolonged communication, the recipient typically doesn't realise they're speaking with someone who has passed away, suggesting that the emotional shock of such a realisation might disrupt the psychic connection enabling these calls. Whether these incidents represent genuine contact from beyond the grave or some manifestations of psychokinetic energy remains debated by parapsychologists to this day. The final message. In October 1968, Don Owens of Toledo, Ohio, was about to experience something that would forever change his understanding of the boundary between life and death. His close friend Lee Epps, with whom he shared a bond closer than brothers, lay dying at Mercy Hospital just 6 blocks from the Owens residence. At precisely 10:30 p.m. on October 26th, while Don was out, his wife Ethel received an urgent phone call. She immediately recognised the voice on the other end as Lee's. "Sis, tell Don I'm feeling real bad. Never felt this way before," Lee said, his voice tinged with distress. "Tell him to get in touch with me the minute he comes in. It's important, sis." When Don returned home, Ethel relayed the message. Concerned, he tried repeatedly to call Lee back, but no one answered. Later he would discover the chilling truth. Lee Epps had died at exactly 10:30 p.m, the precise moment Ethel received his call. The dead father's voice. On January 30th, 1978, a young man in a small German town experienced a similarly inexplicable phenomenon. The phone rang that evening with an unusual sound, a deadened ring that made him question whether it was actually ringing. When he answered, he heard his father's voice clearly say, "I am here, Daddy, here, Daddy." The voice repeated the phrase a third time with more intensity, then asked, "How is Mummy? How is Mummy?" before the line went silent. The witness's wife was present and saw his extreme agitation after the call. He became so shocked he couldn't speak for several minutes. What makes this call particularly extraordinary was that his father had died on September 24th, 1974, over 3 years earlier. The mother's call. In early 1970, Dr. Lester Gelb, a New York psychoanalyst, received a call just as he and his family were about to leave their home for a Sunday outing. His mother had passed away in January of that year at age 90. During her final months, he had called her frequently, and she would always identify him by saying, "Lester?" as soon as she recognised his voice. That Sunday, when Dr. Gelb answered the ringing phone, a voice simply asked, "Lester?" in an inquisitive tone. He immediately recognised it as his mother's distinctive voice with its characteristic crackle and timbre. Stunned, he repeatedly asked the caller to identify herself, but the voice only echoed his name. Finally, after what Dr. Gelb described as a clacking sound, the phone went dead. Though shaken, Dr. Gelb didn't immediately tell his family about the nature of the call. Only a week later did he share that he believed he'd received a call from his deceased mother. The 30-minute conversation. Some phantom calls are remarkably prolonged. In May 1971, Mr. and Mrs. C.E. McConnell of Tucson, Arizona, received a Sunday evening call from their friend Enid Jolson, an elderly author they hadn't heard from in quite some time. The McConnells had been close to Enid, regularly spending Christmas with her and bringing her blackberry wine as a gift. During this unexpected call, they spoke for a full 30 minutes, reminiscing about old times. Enid explained that she had been transferred to the Handmaker Jewish nursing home for the aged in Tucson. When Mrs. McConnell suggested visiting her for her upcoming birthday and bringing the traditional blackberry brandy, Enid replied, "I don't need it now." She mentioned receiving excellent care and sounded remarkably happy and healthy, like the Enid of 20 years ago, according to Mr. McConnell. Several days later, Mrs. McConnell called the nursing home to arrange a visit. The receptionist responded with shocking news. Why, Mrs. Jolson died last Sunday morning. Enid had died at 10:30 a.m, hours before their 30-minute conversation that evening. The monastery switchboard. Dr. Gus Torkildsen, a Wisconsin physician, documented his experience from February 1976 when he visited a Benedictine monastery in northwestern Missouri. At around 6:30 p.m. on February 12th, he entered the main building and, finding no one around, picked up a phone to call the business office. A pleasant male voice answered, identified himself as Father Clement, and directed Dr. Torkildsen to call extension 44 to reach the abbot. When the abbot appeared, he was startled when Torkildsen mentioned Father Clement had directed his call. "Well, Father Clement used to be in charge of the switchboard," the abbot explained, visibly surprised. "But there is no one there now. Father Clement has been dead for several years." The monastery staff confirmed that no one had answered the switchboard during that hour, and there was no other Father Clement at the monastery. A grandmother's warning. In February 1975, Elsie Pendleton of Palos Verde, California, received a call that would ultimately prove prophetic. About 6 months after her mother Mimi's death, Elsie was dealing with concerns about her teenage grandson Scott, whose behaviour had become increasingly reckless after his great-grandmother's passing. One evening, while alone at home, Elsie's phone rang beside her bed. Immediately recognising her deceased mother's distinctive Boston accent, she heard Mimi say, "Elsie, I can't find Connie. I've been trying to get in touch with Connie for 2 or 3 days, and I can't get in touch with her." When Elsie asked what was wrong, Mimi replied, "It's Scott. I've got to talk to Connie. Tell Scott no. Write it down so you won't forget when you see Connie. I said to tell him, to tell Scott no." The line then went dead. The next morning, Elsie was shocked to find the message, "Tell Scott no," written on her message pad in her mother's exact handwriting, not her own characteristic backhand slant. Tragically, Scott's recklessness continued to worsen, and he was later killed in an automobile accident, giving the warning call a chilling significance. A daughter's protection. In another remarkable case from Indianapolis, Indiana, Mrs. Viola Tolan received a call that potentially prevented serious injury. She had been friendly with her neighbour's caretaker, Davis Stone, and his young daughter Ruby, who had died at age 7. After the girl's death, Davis suffered a severe fall from a ladder that left him nearly crippled. His condition was fragile. If he fell asleep in the wrong position, he could be incapacitated for weeks. One evening, while Davis was alone managing his employer's estate, Mrs. Tollin's phone rang. A child's voice that she couldn't immediately place said, "They told me I could not telephone, but I just did, didn't I?" When Mrs. Tollin asked who was calling, the voice replied, "You know me, I am Ruby." Alarmed, Mrs. Tollin hurried next door, where she found Davis asleep in an awkward position that would have likely caused him serious injury. She was able to wake him before any damage occurred. The disconnected phone. In a particularly extraordinary case reported from Chicago, a man received a call meant for his grandmother. The call was apparently placed from West Virginia by a friend known to both of them. During the conversation, the caller wanted to tell his grandmother that she was going away, but that everything would be all right and that her grandson would understand everything in a few days. The voice sounded unusually hollow and distant and stated that it could speak for only a few moments. What made this call impossible by normal means was that their phone had been disconnected the day before. The phone company verified this fact, even sending a technician to the house that evening to show the family the disconnected wires. A few days later, just as the voice had predicted, they received a letter informing them that their friend had died on the day of the mysterious call, at approximately the same time it was received. The previous tenant. In the fall of 1969, a woman named Nora was staying at her family's farm in upstate New York. The farm, built in 1822 by a Swedish immigrant named Hansen, was located about a quarter mile from her neighbours, the Roses, whose house was built in 1818 by the Duncan family. One morning, Nora spotted the Roses' German shepherd chasing her ducks. She attempted to call her neighbours, but got a busy signal on her first try. On her second attempt, an older woman answered. When Nora asked for Barbara Rose, the woman explained she had gone to town. Thinking she was speaking to Barbara's mother, Nora introduced herself and asked the woman to call the dog back. The woman replied that the dog was with her, but added, "Barbara doesn't have a dog. I have the dog, and it is a schnauzer, not a shepherd." As they ended the call, the woman asked Nora to give her regards to Eliza and the girls, and to have Lavinia go over to pick up some preserves. This was disturbing because Eliza Hansen had died many years before, and Lavinia was now 50 and living in Washington State. When Nora called the Roses again, Barbara answered immediately and was shocked by Nora's story. She explained that the previous owners of their house had been the Duncan sisters, Mary and Barbara, who had been close to the Hansen women, particularly Eliza and Lavinia. Mary had owned a schnauzer that was buried in the cemetery behind the barn. The hospital patient. In February 1954, British author Julian Franklin experienced a series of unusual phone calls at his London suburban home. On Sunday, February 7th, his staircase phone began ringing repeatedly but would stop before he could answer. When he did pick up, he would only hear a dial tone. A few days later, his phone behaved similarly. When he finally managed to answer it, he heard the voice of Tom, a friend whose wife had earlier mentioned he was ill in the hospital. They spoke briefly, but the conversation was interrupted by another man who said he wanted to talk to Tom. Franklin later learned that Tom had died at approximately 9:30 that morning, several hours before their phone conversation. These 10 accounts represent just a fraction of the phantom phone call cases documented by Rogo and Bayless. Their research suggests that these mysterious communications occur more frequently than most would believe, following distinct patterns that hint at an underlying phenomenon rather than mere coincidence or fabrication. Whether these calls represent genuine contact from beyond or some manifestation of psychokinetic energy remains debated among parapsychologists. What's clear, however, is that these experiences have profoundly affected those who've received them, leaving them with a sense that the boundary between life and death may be more permeable than we typically assume.